Welcome back, Brooklyn Nets fans. Boy, do we have stuff to talk about. I mean, the way I want to do this video is I'm going to talk about all the news, the Harden stuff, the Joe Harris injury. We'll do that first. Then I'm going to watch the Nets Jazz game, which starts in about 40 minutes from now, and then react to that after. So if you want the Jazz reaction, that's going to be in the end of the video, but all the news reaction, that'll start right now. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and let's get into it. So I've said this before, as a Brooklyn Net fan, New Jersey Net fan, you always expect things to go wrong. You can have a great roster, a great team, you can be NBA Finals favorites, and something is going to go wrong for this Nets team. I've been a Nets fan, watched every game since about the 05-06 season, and you just think back to since those times, everything that has gone wrong for this team just always does. You know, Jason Kidd starts to have a knee injury, demands a trade eventually. The team goes 12-70. 12-70 in a season, ends with the third pick in the draft. It should have been the first, of course, but the lottery gave us the third pick, not the first pick. Missed out on John Wall, had to settle for Derek Favors. They trade for Darren Williams, top 2 point guard in the NBA at the time. Darren Williams turns into garbage a year and a half later. They trade for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. They fall off a cliff. Brook Lopez breaks his foot that same season. Even fast forward to last year, the Nets acquired James Harden. Even the summer before that, they signed Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. Of course, Durant's coming off the injury, but they have those two guys. They start last year with just Durant and Irving. Kyrie Irving goes on this little vacation thing, doesn't tell the Nets where he's at. They trade for James Harden. The Nets are by far NBA Finals favorites last year. We go into the playoffs. The Nets beat the crap out of the Boston Celtics in 5 games, and it was looking like it was not a no doubt, but the Nets were in just a perfect position where if they stayed healthy, they would have been NBA Finals favorites by a lot. According to the odds, they were like a minus 140 or something to win the NBA Finals. And then first game of the Bucks series, James Harden hamstring issue. It's like, okay, it's fine. The Nets won the first 2 games of the series very easily, I must say. They go to Milwaukee, lose a tough game 3. Then this was kind of the breaking point, or the turning point, I should say, in Brooklyn Nets history, possibly, if this James Harden trade does go down in the upcoming week here with the Sixers. But Kyrie Irving comes down, turns his ankle on Giannis, right? That happens in Game 4 last year. Bucks tie up the series 2-2. James Harden comes back, grade 2 hamstring strain, tries to play on it, right? The Nets win Game 5 miraculously somehow. They lose in Game 6 at Milwaukee. Game 7 against Milwaukee last year, they go to overtime. Durant hits the big shot, toes on the line. They lose in overtime. And that really felt like, as a Brooklyn Nets fan, the most defeating feeling that I can ever feel for anything. Maybe if the Giants lost in the Super Bowl, it'd probably be worse than that, obviously. But for the Nets, and as a Nets fan at least, that was a rock bottom moment for me, because I know that if the Nets were somehow able to advance and play the Atlanta Hawks in the next round, the conference finals, I would have liked the Nets' chances there in that conference finals, right? Then you play the Suns. Who knows what would happen there, right? But at the same time, they were so freaking close. And last year just felt like the year. Jeff Green was playing well. Blake Griffin was making threes last year. Everything was just, the stars were aligning. And then, of course, injuries happened. 2 of the 3 stars get hurt, changed the entire series. Durant was asked to carry the entire team, and it didn't happen. And we go into this offseason knowing that we are this close, need to get some new guys, right? Jeff Green leaves in free agency, which sucked, but we were hoping we could replace him with a Paul Millsap type guy and some other veterans, and it did not work out. Paul Millsap has been a shell of his former self this year, has been out of the rotation. Guys like James Johnson have not worked out that great, of course, so the Nets did not have a great free agency. Now, the draft, they hit on their draft picks. Cam Thomas and Day'Ron Sharpe, Kessler Edwards especially, are looking like good draft picks. So those are young guys, year 1, 19, 20-year-old guys. But the veterans they signed in free agency, it did not work out. Even bringing back Blake Griffin, which seemed like a no-brainer, he has not played nearly as well as he has last year. Blake's been much better the past 2 games, but Blake Griffin on the season has not been that great and sometimes has had some coaches' DMPs. LaMarcus Aldridge, he's had great games this year, but we know his limitations as a defender at this point in his career. But really, we came into this year with such high expectations as Nets fans, and we really thought that this could be the year, right? Last year was a tough year. We had the tough loss. Injuries happen. We get it. This was the year where things were going to finally go right, hopefully, and we would get to the finals and hopefully win the damn thing, right? And during this season, before the season starts, there's the New York vaccine mandate, We thought Kyrie Irving was going to get vaccinated. I'm pretty sure he said he was going to. Never showed up to his appointment. He ends up getting, not vaccinated at all, and he has to sit out all the home games based on the New York mandate with the vaccine. Kevin Durant, a few weeks ago, goes down with the MCL sprain. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, some rumors start happening. James Harden has been unhappy in Brooklyn, not happy about Kyrie's vaccination thing, and not happy about the injuries and the availability of some guys, right? So we're thinking, okay, well, James Harden, maybe after this season, he might get traded, right? Because it's like a contract year. He has a player option after this year. We're thinking maybe James Harden in the summer of 2022 maybe gets traded, right? But now, today, a report comes out from Shams Charania saying that sources, the Philadelphia 76ers are expected to pursue Brooklyn's James Harden ahead of the NBA trade deadline Thursday, and the Nets are now open to discussing a deal. So before, it seemed like the Nets were not interested in discussing James Harden's, availability for a trade until the offseason. But now apparently the Nets are all of a sudden kind of interested in discussing a James Harden deal in season, like happening in the next week. Now, do I think James Harden gets traded? I still lean no. Well, let me rephrase that. Do I think he gets traded in the upcoming week? No, I don't think so. I lean 60-40 that James Harden is still a Net post-trade deadline, but I could be wrong. It seems very real at this point, right? There was a lot that's happened here for the Nets the past couple weeks. They're on a 6-game losing streak right now. I think I saw a stat somewhere that no team that's ever been on a 5-game losing streak has won the NBA Finals, so the Nets have their backs against the wall there if they want to get it done this year. But anyway, Harden has a hamstring injury, it's like a rest day type thing. His hand hurts. He missed a game there as well. And then, of course, I didn't make a reaction to this game because it was so late. I was so tired. But the Sacramento Kings game where the Nets were supposed to win that game, they were on a big losing streak. Sacramento is an awful team. De'Aaron Fox was out. And that was a game the Nets were up about, 12, 14 points. At most points during that game, the Nets had control against Sacramento. But James Harden individually played, I would say, has to be his worst game as a Brooklyn Net. Maybe the worst game of his career. Like, it was that bad. James Harden had a 4-point performance on 2 of 11 shooting, had about 5 or 6 turnovers, looked so disinterested on defense. I've never seen a player perform like that before. Like, it was disgusting. And James Harden was clearly just going through the motions and didn't really care. The Nets on this 5-game road trip against 4 really good teams, that was the game against the Kings they had to get. And James Harden completely crapped the bed and did not show up for that game whatsoever. Kyrie Irving had an off shooting night, but at least he gives effort. I appreciate Kyrie for that. James Harden, on the other hand, did not give a damn whether the Nets won that game. So you can tell based on his body language and just the way he's been playing in some of these games that maybe he has checked out by now. We've seen this before with James Harden. He forced his way out of Houston just a year and a half, not even a year and a half ago, a year and a month ago. So we've seen this act before from James Harden. Now, my question to James Harden is this. If you do get traded to the 76ers, yes, you're back with Daryl Morey, a guy you have a great connection with, the GM over there, but do the Sixers give you, James Harden, the best chance to win a championship? Because that's what James Harden is. That's all he's playing for right now. He has the MVP, the scoring titles, all the accomplishments, all-star appearances. He has all that. The only thing that's really missing from James Harden's resume is an NBA championship. So does going to the 76ers, does that improve your chances? Because I have a hard time believing that. Because hypothetically, if James Harden were traded to the 76ers tomorrow, who are the Nets getting back? They're probably getting Ben Simmons back, of course, who has not played this year, obviously. They might get Danny Green or Tobias Harris, one of those guys. They might get a Tyrese Maxey, a Thibault. Like, they're going to take back valuable assets from the Sixers as it is. Then you're going to have Joel Embiid, James Harden. You're going to take a hit with your role players, maybe even Seth Curry. I forgot to mention him. Seth Curry could be a part of that package as well if that trade were to happen. So basically, Harden going to the Sixers via trade is going to take some of the assets away from the Sixers and make their team worse. So, yes, you're gaining a James Harden who is still a good NBA player. He's not a superstar anymore, in my opinion, at least. He's had some games where he's looked like it, but some games where he's looked horrible. So, James Harden's an inconsistent, really good player right now, in my opinion. So, I don't put him in the top 5, top 10 anymore. He's not been that so far, in my opinion. He's had his games, but not consistently. So if you're James Harden, you go to the 76ers, the Nets get Simmons plus 2 other guys back that are valuable role players. How does that help your chances of winning a championship. Like, I know Joel Embiid is playing at an MVP level. He is like the most dominant player in the NBA right now this season, right? We've seen that. But Joel Embiid, as I've said before in the past, has really had, he's had durability issues. He's been out before. It's not like Joel Embiid has been like this super durable guy and plays 80 plus games a year. No, he's had injuries in the past. And then you put a declining James Harden on that Sixers team and ask him to just carry that with Joel Embiid. I don't know. It just does not seem like it's going to help his chances. Now, as a Brooklyn Nets fan, I just want to win a damn title. I don't care if Harden's on the team. I don't care if Simmons is on the team. I don't care if Danny Green's on the team. I just want to win an NBA championship as a Brooklyn Nets fan. I don't care if it's James Harden. I'm not in this for the players. I'm in this for the team. There are certain guys I like more than others, of course. I love Kyrie Irving. Not a big Bruce Brown guy anymore. Like, we get that, right? There's certain players we like more than others. But at the end of the day, I just want to see a Brooklyn Nets championship in my lifetime, right? That's all I want to see. And this team has the core to do it. When you have Kevin Durant sign an extension and he's here for the next 4 or 5 years now, you have Kyrie Irving as talented as he is, only playing half the games. I personally believe the best chance for the Nets to win the finals this year is having James Harden on the roster. We don't know what Ben Simmons looks like. Like, I'm assuming Ben Simmons is staying in shape, but we don't know that, right? I'm pretty sure Ben Simmons, it was announced he got vaccinated a couple weeks ago, so maybe that's a bit of a clue, but at least he has that, right? So I don't know. I just don't really, I find it hard to believe that James Harden going to Philadelphia right now gives him a better chance of winning a finals. So I don't know. I don't know what is going through his mind. I'm sure James Harden's frustrated, and I'm definitely agreeing with him that he has every right to be frustrated, right? I try to be fair because when Kyrie signed here in 2019, there was no COVID, there was no mandates, so it kind of came out of nowhere, of course. No one expected a world pandemic at that point in time. So I try to be fair to everybody. Of course, Kevin Durant going down for 6 to 8 weeks with the MCL sprain. That sucks. And now when the Nets play these home games, which there have been more road games than home games lately for the Nets at least, when they do play these home games, we saw it versus the Lakers and the Nuggets, James Harden has a lot to carry. And I don't think Harden played in that Nuggets game. So Harden's had one game at home since Kevin Durant's been out, and that happened like 3 weeks ago. So Harden has not endured playing these home games without KD at just one time. And in that one game, Harden played very well. He had like a 33-point triple-double against the Lakers where the Nets lost that game. But at the same time, I get where James Harden's coming from. It's frustrating. I get it. But he has to be more of a forward thinker here, right? You're assuming Kevin Durant's going to come back at some point. The Nets will make some type of trade to improve their roster. They need a 3-and-D guy. They need like a natural center potentially. The Nets will make a move or two to help this roster and make it better right now because the Nets have to realize this team needs work. This is not an elite team right now. Will they be? Can they be when the big three comes back? Yes, but right now, the Nets are not a good team. I have to be honest. They have not been a good team the past 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it's been. They have not been good, especially since Kevin Durant's been out, obviously. And even when KD was playing, yes, the Nets were in the first seed, second seed most of the season, but they had a lot of very close games against not so good competition. So the Nets were never like a dominant team. The only time I felt the Nets were really dominant this year was that win at Chicago a few weeks ago when the big three played, I think, their first game together, and they won that game by like 35 points on the road at Chicago, who was the 1 seed at that time. So that was the one time I felt like, okay, the Nets are back, they're dominant, like this big three is so hard to beat when they're together. And it's true, like when the Nets big three has played together, they have been so freaking dominant offensively especially, but they have destroyed people. I think they have 16 games together, and they're either 13-3 or 12-4 in that time. Like, they have been so good together. So for the people that want to say, oh, of course Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden didn't work out, of course that was going to happen. Like, yes, okay, you're kind of right, but you're also very wrong because the concern was that James Harden was too much of a ball-dominant guy and wanted to take too many shots. That part was wrong because when James Harden came to Brooklyn, he became more of a pass-first guy, which was unlike him in Houston. Yes, he was a great passer in Houston, but he had to score a lot more because he did not have a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving playing next to him. So when James Harden got to Brooklyn, he was more of a pass-first guy. So for those people that were like, oh, it's never going to work out, there's only one basketball, right? Only one ball. How's that going to work? When that happened, like, they were wrong because when the big three played together in Brooklyn, they were a fantastic team, a dominant team. So for those people to kind of take a victory lap because of that, like, you're wrong. The Nets, the big three worked for the Brooklyn Nets. The problem was injuries, vaccine mandates, and setbacks. Like, all that crap got in the way. If there were no injuries in the world and everyone was healthy at all times, the Brooklyn Nets would have been a dominant team had the big three played together. Like, that would have been a thing. So for people to sit back and be like, huh, I knew it was never going to work. Like, no, like, you're not right. Like, the big three was a great team together. There were just so many variables that got in the way and destroyed the chances of them being a great team. I think the Nets right now are 29-22, probably will be 23 after tonight, but they have been a struggling team this year because they have not had a full squad. The big three has played together in 2 games this year. They are 2-0 in those games. The first game was at Indiana. That was Kyrie's first game. The second one was the at Chicago game where they killed the Bulls on the road. So I'm just saying, when the Nets big three plays together, they are tremendous, and I think the toughest team to beat in the NBA. The problem is they never play together. It's been a year, basically a full calendar year, and a month. So we're talking 13 months these guys have been together, and they played in 16 games together. That's like, you just can't have that, because as I've said in the past, when you're paying 3 guys on your roster that much money in a salary cap league, you need those 3 guys to be available, because the Nets bench now and role players are not as great because they can't pay that many guys that much money. Like Joe Tsai, the Nets owner, is already paying a bunch of money for the luxury tax. The Nets are over that, right? So he's already paying a bunch of extra money. We have Joe Harris on a big contract. Patty Mills makes a decent amount of money. Like, there's guys that make money on this team, of course, but outside of the big three, it's tough to pay many more guys to come over here and help because, it's a salary cap league. So once that Kevin Durant injured, once Kyrie Irving can only play half the games, it's like, oh crap, we have one guy and decent role players. Like, that's the situation we're in right now. So it's unfortunate, and a lot of it's out of the Nets' control. But as for James Harden, look, at this point, if he don't want to be here, then it is what it is. That's part of James Harden's career. The guy is not one for a reason, right? Let's be honest. Like, James Harden had Dwight Howard next to him. That didn't work out. He had Chris Paul next to him. He got him out of town. Then it was Russell Westbrook, and they traded assets for him. That didn't work out for his season. Then he forces his way out of Houston, wants to play in Brooklyn, and then decides like a year later, nah, I don't want to be here no more. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, that's kind of how James Harden's been. Like, he's a great NBA player, one of the best of all time, right? I mean, he's one of the best scorers of all time. Let's be honest. All-around player, maybe not so much. But just scoring the basketball and just being talented, James Harden's one of the better basketball players of all time, right? There's no denying that. But the guy has made career moves and has done things throughout his career where he's kind of his own worst enemy. Not taking care of his body, going to the club when he probably shouldn't be going to the club. Like, that type of stuff, that's on you. Like, I can't really sit here and defend that stuff. So is it James Harden's fault that Kyrie's playing half the games and Kevin Durant's out? No, but there are things throughout James Harden's career where he's his own worst enemy. I'm sitting here trying to warm up to the idea of a Ben Simmons trade, and like, I don't like Ben Simmons. I really don't like Ben Simmons. Ever since that Nets-Sixers series back when D'Angelo Russell was here, it was D'Lo and Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, that team, Joe Harris. And, I just hated Ben Simmons ever since that series, especially Joel Embiid, because I remember Embiid like elbowed Jared Allen in the face and started laughing about it. I was like, F this guy. But anyway, for Ben Simmons, I mean, look, I think realistically, if Ben Simmons was a Brooklyn Net, I think it would be a good fit. I'm not going to lie, because I think the Nets would be such a more fast-paced team because Ben Simmons loves to run the break. He's a really good passer. He can't shoot for shit. We know that, but he's a good defender. Like, if the Nets had a perimeter defender like a Ben Simmons and a healthy Nick Claxton out there as well at the same time, that's a scary defensive duo right there. Like, those guys can switch on anybody. So there is upside to it. I'm not sitting here saying that Ben Simmons is better than James Harden. I don't think that. But if they got Ben Simmons plus, Maxey and Danny Green, let's call it, like, that's a decent haul. Obviously, looking at it right now, the Houston Rockets won the trade, right? That's how it looks right now. Unless the Nets somehow won a finals, right? The Houston Rockets won that trade by a mile. That's how it looks right now. So I don't think the Nets are ever going to get a fair return for what they had to trade for James Harden. The Nets already lost that trade. They have to trade James Harden now if they want to for, 75 cents on the dollar. Like, they're not going to get the same type of return that the Houston Rockets got for James Harden 13 months ago. It's not happening. So that kind of sucks, but I get it, because James Harden right now is 32, I think it is, years old, and he has been declining, not taking care of his body. He's been way too inconsistent, and the last couple of years has been injured. Like, James Harden, one of the most appealing things about James Harden was that the guy played 75 plus games every year, plus the playoffs. Like, James Harden was crazy durable when he played for the Rockets. Then he gets to the Nets, out of shape, hurts his hamstring 3 times last year, and then this year has the hand injury, coming back from the hamstring, now has another hamstring injury again. Like, it's just a bunch of crap over and over again. So the James Harden being very durable thing is not even happening anymore. So Harden at this point is kind of damaged goods. Like, we have to be honest, he's not the same guy we traded for a year ago. James Harden has looked at much differently than he was in Houston because Harden has been way too inconsistent this year. He's shown flashes, he's had games where he's looked like vintage James Harden, but we're not getting that on a night in, night out basis. And now if this happens, if James Harden was traded, this is now the second team he's quit on in like 14 months. It's not a good look. So there's a problem there. I don't think the Nets will get near what they had to trade for James Harden. That's the sad part about being a Nets fan. Like, we're not going to get anything close to what we had to trade for James Harden if we trade him a year later. So that's just how it is. So that's my thoughts on James Harden. I'm 60-40 he stays, but I do think anything's possible. Like I said last week that I'd be astonished if he was traded at the deadline. I would not be astonished anymore. That has changed by now. It'd still be a bit surprising because the Nets traded for him literally a year ago, but just based on these reports, how checked out Harden seems, these like fake injuries they're making up to keep him out of games. Like, he's not playing tonight. Like, something's going on here. So I don't know. It still would surprise me in a way, but it would not be as shocking as it once seemed like a week ago. So on to Joe Harris now. So Joe Harris's agent said that he might need a second procedure on his ankle that he hurt back in November? It was a long time ago. The quote was that this procedure would fix the ankle once and for good. Is that even a thing? I thought it was once and for all. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, Joe Harris might need a second procedure, whatever the hell that means. But that's not good either. Now, Joe Harris has said he's confident he'll be able to return this year regardless. But at the same time, it's concerning. And Joe Harris is one of those names that could be in there for trade talks here in the next week. And we did see news that the Nets are holding off a decision on Joe Harris's ankle for another 2 weeks, which is pretty weird timing because of the trade deadline. So are the Nets waiting to see if Joe Harris will be traded before deciding if he wants surgery? Because if he is traded, he might just opt to get surgery. But if Joe Harris is not traded, they may just take him back at 90% and say, all right, just play it for us and let's see how it goes. Let's try and win a title here. So the Nets are just waiting 2 weeks to see if Joe Harris should get this second procedure done. And I think a lot of that has to do with the potential of him being traded. It definitely seems possible. Joe Harris right now has a $17.3 million cap hit. So Joe Harris can be traded for a decent player, right? You can get a good player in return for that type of money. The Nets have a couple of trade exceptions from the DeAndre Jordan trade and something else. I forget what it is now. But the Nets have a couple of trade exceptions, one for like $11 million, the other's like $5 million. So if the Nets can package Joe Harris and some young player, Nick Claxton, and get themselves a very good role player or something like that, that's a possibility. And I do think Joe Harris, I do think he does come back this year. Like, I don't know that for a fact, but just based on what actual doctors are saying about the situation, they would be surprised if Joe Harris is out the rest of the year. So I'm choosing to believe and hoping that Joe Harris does return this year. We've seen how big of a difference he makes for this Nets team, how when Joe Harris was healthy, the Nets were a top 5 3-point shooting team. And then there was a point when Joe Harris was out where the Nets were ranked 29th in the NBA in three-point shooting. So he is so vital to this offense, obviously. Joe Harris is not the best defender. He'll give effort, but he's not the best at it. But the way he can space the floor and knock down three-pointers at 43, 45, 47% clips, it's definitely tough to find that. So Joe Harris is a very important player for this team, and I do want to see him back. I miss that guy very much. Yes, he may have lost us the Bucks series last year. It wasn't all his fault, but he played like crap. But I do want the guy back. I do think Joe Harris is a guy that we didn't really realize how important he was until he was gone. So I want him back, and I don't know how much more serious his injury is, but apparently it didn't heal right, or something's still irritating it. I don't know. There might be another small procedure to be done here, and we'll see. But I do also think there's a possibility that Joe Harris is traded if the Nets get the right offer for him. So we'll see how that goes, but that's pretty much it for the Harris news. I just want him back as soon as possible. If he's traded for it, because I love Joe Harris, right? So I don't want him to be traded, but if the Nets can trade Joe Harris for a guy that can help us win right now, I might want to make that move. Like I definitely love Joe. I don't want to see him leave. He's one of the last OG Nets left on this team back from 2016. So it'd be tough to see him go. But as I said, I'm a Nets fan. Like I'm here for the team, not the players. I want to win a finals, right now, like as soon as possible. So if trading Joe Harris is best for the Nets, then you know what? That's how it's got to be. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm gonna cut it off now. I'm gonna react to the Jazz game once that's over. It's 8:45 right now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the Harden rant and the Joe Harris news update and all that, but we'll talk about the Jazz game in a bit here. So the fourth quarter starting up, but the game's over. The Nets are down 73-105 entering the fourth quarter, and unless they make a amazing comeback, it's just not happening tonight. So yeah, the Jazz win. The Nets lose their seventh straight now. I think seventh straight. It's about to be 8 straight when they play the Nuggets on Sunday. Yeah, nothing's good right now. It's just everything is nothing's going right, and it's just like that meme of this is fine with the dog and the house is burning down. It's kind of like that right now. James Harden was not on the Nets bench tonight, which is interesting because last time he was out, he was on the bench. So take that for what you will. Apparently he was in the back getting treatment is what they called it, but I doubt that. It honestly would not shock me if James Harden returned to Brooklyn at some point tomorrow or even tonight, because I just don't see him playing Sunday at this point. I don't know. It's just weird to think that Harden's Nets career might be over and that pitiful performance versus the Kings may have been his last game as a Brooklyn Net, but it's very possible. And at this point, I'm not even sure if James Harden will be a Net ever again. I don't know, will we see Harden be a Net at any point in the future? I don't know. Nick Claxton did not start the second half, and we're like, okay, that's interesting. Blake Griffin got to start over Nick Claxton, and then it came out that Nick Claxton had hamstring tightness once again. So he'll be out for, I don't know, at least a couple games, I would assume. Nick Claxton's always hurt, no surprise there. At this point, I just don't know what to do. I really don't. Kyrie Irving's had a rough couple games here shooting-wise. I mean, he looks good with the eye test, but just his shot's been off the last couple of games. The Kings game and now this one, he has not played that well. James Johnson's horrendous. He started out 0 for 8. He had 7 shots in the first 3 minutes. I don't know why that guy's shooting so much. Bruce Brown missed another wide open layup, so that's typical Bruce Brown at this point. Blake Griffin played well. I think he played pretty well for the most part. He can't make a shot for his life, but I just love how that guy will take charges and lay out for the ball on the ground. So he can play for my team any day, but nobody looked that great. I mean, Cam Thomas started out well, had a really good first quarter. We'll see how he plays here in garbage time coming up. But yeah, I mean, no one really had a great game today. Day'Ron Sharpe actually had a pretty nice game when he was in there. Didn't play a ton of minutes, a lot in the third quarter. Had an awesome block. Someone went for a dunk and he blocked it off the backboard. So that was great to see. But it's just an unwatchable group of guys right now. This Nets team stinks. Oh, and backwards dunk by Bembry on a fast break. All right, well, I mean, I guess maybe they'll make a little fourth quarter run here with the non-starters in it for the Jazz, but still, it's a very unwatchable group of guys right now. So right as I stopped recording in the first half of the video, we'll call it, I saw a report that Tyrese Maxey would not be made available in a James Harden trade. I don't know how much I believe that stuff, but if it's true, it makes the return for James Harden less appealing because Maxey is the second-year guy having a breakout season, a guard, and Nets need a guard because if Kyrie Irving can't play home games, you need somebody. So if he's not in the deal, it would not really appeal to me too much. I mean, you can work around that, I guess. You can maybe ask for Simmons, Tobias Harris, and Seth Curry, and maybe ask for some draft picks, but that's still not... It's not doing it for me to the level of Tyrese Maxey. That's the guy I really want if we were to make a Harden to Sixers trade. And it's not like I want Ben Simmons. I told you guys, I'm not the biggest Ben Simmons guy, but at the same time, if you're going to trade James Harden and you have to, and he has quit on this team, which it kind of looks like he has, you got to get somebody for him. And Ben Simmons is 25, I think, 26 maybe at most, and he's still a young guy, and I guess, a top 40, 30 player in the league when he's out there playing, you know what I mean? So I guess you could do worse, but now the score is now, it's 111-80. Oh, my God. But, yeah, I mean, Ben Simmons is not a guy I am dying to have, but I guess he's better than getting nobody, you know what I mean? So if the Nets are forced to trade James Harden, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I don't know, because I always wanted this big three to work out. It always felt like it was meant to be in a way, but James Harden now going to be 33 next year. going to be paid like $50-60 million per year next year. He's already declining as a player, doesn't take care of his body. He's a quitter from what we've seen already. I give James Harden a lot of credit last year for coming back and playing with the hamstring issue, but it's clear now that it seems like he's quitting on this team. He doesn't want to be a part of the situation. He does not think this Nets team right now is good enough to win a championship. And maybe he's right. Right now as a Nets fan, I have no clue how the Nets are the number one team for NBA Finals odds. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I would pick the Warriors, the Suns, any day over us right now, probably some other teams. So I don't get that, of course. I'm still hopeful the Nets can win a championship, but right now, at least on this day, it does not look likely at all, especially if James Harden was traded for Ben Simmons and some other guys, and Simmons has not touched the floor this year, so that's concerning. It just seems like everything that can go wrong right now for the Nets is going wrong, and I just don't know how they fix it. Like, they can make a trade, a Harden trade. They can trade Joe Harris for somebody else and try to just make a run at this because, as I said, having Kevin Durant under contract is the biggest thing. They have him for a few more years, but how many years of high-level basketball does Kevin Durant have? Like, the Nets have to go all out the next 2, 3, 4 years, as long as Kevin Durant's here, to try and get a ring, because once Kevin Durant's gone, that was your best chance at having it. Kevin Durant is the best player in Nets history. Like, let's be honest. So they have to find a way to put a team around him, and I hope that Sean Marks does it. I still trust Sean Marks, and there will be revisionist history saying that the James Harden trade is like the worst trade of all time. And sure, maybe there's some truth to that. Nothing beats the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade, but the James Harden trade looks god-awful right now. There's the stats, actually. Kyrie is 6 of 20 tonight. Wow, yeah, not a good shooting night. But yeah, right now it looks like the James Harden trade is one of the worst of all time, but I don't really blame Sean Marks for making that move at the time, because you looked at the Nets roster. Kyrie Irving was on his hiatus. He was at his sister's birthday party. He left the Nets for a couple weeks, and they tried to get another star in there to, help Kevin Durant. And at the time, James Harden was a very durable guy, top 10 player in the NBA, and played with Kevin Durant back in OKC, so it made all the sense in the world. And now, based on how things have played out with the mandates and the injuries, the James Harden trade looks like it was the worst move ever. And ironically, tonight, Jared Allen had a 29-point, 22-rebound game. Apparently, Karis LeVert had a great game as well. It's just like everything is going wrong for the Nets today. This day here, February 4th, 2022, will not go down as a good day in Nets history. So, yeah, I just don't want to go back and be like a hypocrite about it and use hindsight as my reason for why the James Harden trade was terrible. Like, I think you make the James Harden trade, 9 times out of 10 in that situation. Like, the Nets had a championship roster. They had the role players. They had Joe Harris. They had Shamet. They had not Blake Griffin at the time. He was on a buyout. But, they had good role players. Jeff Green in Brooklyn at the time last year. So, to sacrifice Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Taurean Prince, you don't want to do those things, but to get a guy like James Harden, who, as long as he was in shape and stayed healthy, was going to be a top 10 player in the NBA for the next few years. And the Nets had not like a small championship window, but I would say a 3, 4, 5 year window with the, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving window, because once again, Kevin Durant, he's now 33, I believe. How much longer does he play at a very high level? He's still playing at a tremendously high level, but he can't stay healthy. He's had hamstring issues the past, couple years, and has the knee injury now. So there's been injuries with Kevin Durant, but when he's out there, he's clearly one of the 2 best players in the NBA in the world right now. So the Nets have to take advantage of this Kevin Durant window, and even if it's part-time Kyrie Irving, they have to find a way to put a good enough team out there. And as I said earlier, I think James Harden staying gives the Nets the best chance of winning a title this year, but it just seems at this point that James Harden has just quit on the Brooklyn Nets, and that's just how it is. So if you don't want to be here, then whatever, F him, whatever he wants, fine. But I hope Sean Marks does realize that he has the leverage. The Sixers are the ones that really want James Harden. So I do hope Sean Marks takes advantage of that and gets the best possible return for James Harden, because I don't know how much longer James Harden's going to be looked at as a very valuable asset in the NBA. I do think his name and reputation has taken a hit the past couple years. Number one, because he's quit on 2 franchises in the span of a year and a half. And number 2, because of his declining play. And number 3, because of his injuries in recent years. James Harden is not as appealing as he was a year and a half ago. That's just the truth of the matter. So I hope the Nets can still get a good return for James Harden. Of course, the Nets salary cap right now is not in a good spot. So you're getting Ben Simmons back, who makes a lot of money. I think Danny Green makes a good amount of money still. Tyrese Maxey's going to be on a cheap deal, of course. So, I don't know who you're going to get, how many picks you're going to get, all that crap, but it just depends on the return. And I still want to make that Brooklyn Nets trade idea video. I'll probably, drop that on like maybe Sunday because I had the graphics pretty much made up here, but a lot has changed now since James Harden looks like he may legitimately be out of the Brooklyn Nets. So we'll see how that goes. But there will be more stuff coming out in the coming days, and I will make more updates and give my reactions, of course. But it just seems like nothing is going right now. The Nets are basically in the playing game right now in the playoff standings. They are just not in a good spot. We were in first place like 2 weeks ago, it felt like, right? So it's just crazy how quickly things happened. And Kevin Durant can't come back soon enough. Same thing for Joe Harris. Those guys got to get back ASAP. And, assuming James Harden is traded, they have to find a way to get the best possible pieces to still help them compete for a title this season. So as a Nets fan, I don't want to lose all my hope for winning a championship this year, but I do realize that the Nets should not have the best odds to win it right now, and it's just a very difficult task, like keeping everyone healthy. Does Kyrie get to play home games when April comes around? All those type of things. There's a lot of factors here, so we'll see what happens. It's just been a disappointing day. I was at dinner when I got the news, and I was kind of just in a bad mood since then. I was just kind of deflated on, not a bad mood. I was just kind of disappointed because I'm like, damn, this big three is only going to play 16 games together. It's that was not what we had envisioned when the trade was made, and it's pretty sad. So anyway, hopefully they find the best possible outcome here, and I can't say I'm surprised Harden kind of quit on the Nets based on his history, but that's just how Harden is. When things get tough around him, he just tends to run away from it. So it is what it is. Kevin Durant is a guy that when the Nets had, there was a situation this year where the Nets played somebody, I forget who it was, it might have been the Sixers game. The Nets had 7 active players, and Durant was questionable with an injury, and I think you need 8 players to play in a game in the NBA, so if Durant announced he was out, the game would have been postponed, but Kevin Durant decided to play in that game. Everybody was out that game. James Harden was out, Blake Griffin was out, I believe Patty Mills was out. All the good players were out. It was just basically Kevin Durant, Blake Griffin, and all the 19, 20-year-old rookies, and they played that game versus Sixers, and they won. So Kevin Durant's the type of guy who looks for a solution and doesn't look to make excuses like a James Harden does. James Harden all the time in press conferences will talk about, I'm still getting back to 100% from my hamstring, or, it's tough with guys out. James Harden's always sitting there making excuses, right? And Kevin Durant's the type of guy who's looking for a solution. I like people like that. That's how I am. I hate people that always complain and try to, talk about the problem. I'm always looking for a solution. So I love Kevin Durant's mindset, and we need more guys like that. I'm not saying that James Harden's personality can never win a ring, but that's been the case so far. So I don't know. I just have no idea what to think anymore. It's disappointing. I'm looking at Claxton in street clothes now. So yeah, it's just a really shitty day for a Nets fan, but we'll find out what happens here in the coming weeks. A lot of stuff should happen here in the next couple weeks, but I will make some reaction videos, of course, when that happens. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time.